Previously, we'd already defined a query object in our KB to be the number of tourist attractions in France and China. Now let's see some further examples. Suppose that now the travel agency requires us to make some changes to the query object that has been defined. Because now they want to have the possibility of querying the graph to find the number of tourist attractions located in the cities of a given country. That isn't necessarily France or China. We will then need to make some changes in the definition of this query object. This is so that it receives the country as parameter. We'll start by deleting the filter and the order defined. At the parameters node, we click Enter, and there we define country ID. We set country as description, and we also define the corresponding filter. This is so that it will consider the value of this country in the query. We'll save these changes, and now we'll edit the web panel to enable the user to select the country from a list, with that value being considered as parameter for the query. So, the first thing we do in the web panel is to define the country ID variable. And then we'll define it as a dynamic combo so that it saves country ID and value and shows country name as description. In order to do this, we'll edit the control type property, and then select the dynamic combo box value. There's an indication that the item value, that is the value that will be saved, will be country ID, and the value to be shown will be country name. Now, what's still pending is for the query viewer control to consider the country ID variable as parameter. Note that the parameters property of the query viewer control has the parameters variable automatically associated. That variable is based on a structured data type that is automatically created upon dragging the query viewer control over the form. The variable was also defined automatically. If we look at its structure, we'll see that it's a collection of parameters, each with a name and a value. Something important to consider is that both items are of the character type. This should be borne in mind at the time of loading this collection with the parameters to be considered. They must all be of the same data type. What we must do then is to load the variable of our filter to the collection of parameters associated with the query viewer control. The question now is, where will we code that load? And in which event? So let's consider the following. What we want is for the parameter to be loaded when a country is selected from the list, thus updating the query to show the number of attractions in the cities of the country selected. To achieve this, we'll code the click event associated with the country ID variable. This event will be triggered every time that the user selects an element from the dynamic combo. When we go to the variable sector, we'll see that the parameter variables have already been created, based on the data type that represents a parameter, and the parameters variable based on the data type that represents the collection of parameters. Therefore, inside the event sector, and in the click event associated with the country ID variable, we receive the load of the parameters variable through the output of a data provider. This data provider receives the value of the country selected, and then loads that parameter into the collection, indicating the name and the value considered. Since it's of the character data type, we must convert it, and that's why we use the toString method. Let's go back to the web panel. And to view another type of graph in runtime, we'll make a change by selecting Donut 3D. And now, we press F5. We select the web panel, and there we verify that, if we change the country, the query will be updated. Now let's take a quick look at the possibility that we also have for selecting, in runtime, the type of output for the query. In our example, we'll consider that the user wishes to have the possibility of deciding between viewing the output as a chart, as a table, or as a card. So we define a new type variable. Of the character type, and this will appear as a combo with the options chart, table, and card. In the control type property, we select combo box and assign the values. We go to the events, and in the click event associated with this variable, we'll modify the value of the type property of the query viewer control so that, for each case, it takes the corresponding value. For that purpose, we use the control structure doCase, which allows us to consider what to do, depending on the value. In this case, it takes the variable type. So we indicate the name of the control, queryViewer1, dot, the type property, and then we indicate the value. When the value selected is chart, we'll build a chart with columns, and we'll assign a title to it, Attractions by City. When the type selected is table, we will then view it as a table, or otherwise as a card. Let's now press F5. Note that for each column, the table format enables us to sort in ascending or descending order, or to show or hide values. And from here, it's also possible to export the outcome in various formats.